Still typing, please continue. So we're going to open, as we did, if you remember when we had our orientation webinar. One thing that we like to do at the TA Center is we like to come together and what we say is open in a good way. And so we wanted to do that today. We wanted to come together as just an opportunity to bring us so we're all on the same page, because we know throughout the day-to-day activities can come and we can get lost in our tasks. So, and then this is a meeting. So we don't want this to just be another appointment on your calendar, but we want to come together and really meet so we can have a meaningful and purposeful meeting. So Mark is our technical assistant that's handling all the behind the scenes. So I'm going to ask Mark to help us out from time to time. So Mark, if you wouldn't mind, please sharing the Wisdom of Ceremony framework. Thank you, Mark. And so this was introduced during our orientation meeting, and you've seen it. We talked a little bit about it. I know it's a really big idea. However, it's grounded in elements that I believe are, or that we believe are shared throughout our tribal communities, our indigenous communities, if you will. And so again, we wanted to take a moment to just look at this framework and remember why we're here and why we are doing the work that we're doing. Maybe we have family members, maybe we have friends. All being connected to our tribal communities, we see our young people and our families go through the struggles that they do, and yet we've all made commitments to come and to be here, to join programs and join efforts in your communities to do something about it. And so we wanted to recognize that. And we do that within the Wisdom of Ceremony framework. So this isn't necessarily a prescribed list of things that we need to do, but we just recognize that there are elements within ceremonies, ceremonial frameworks that many of our tribal communities do. And those elements, there's always an element when you're planning for a ceremony, there's always an element of planning and preparation, an element of commitment. There's always an element of sacrifice, of some comfort. There's also that element of follow-through, where we have to follow through from the very beginning all the way to the end. And then finally, there's that rest and reflection element. So within all the work that you're doing, that you're coming to, it's a really big, sometimes it can be a really big venture in front of us, and we don't know how we're going to quite put this together yet. But if we take these elements that we learned from our ceremonial framework, and we can take it one step at a time, we know that there's planning involved, we know that there's going to be a level of commitment, sacrifice, follow through, and then ultimately we'll be able to rest and reflect, and then start that process over again. Because after all, everything that we're doing is meaningful and purposeful. And so that's what we want to take away from this slide today. So thank you, Mark. So now that we're all sort of in the same place and really thinking about where we are, reflecting back on those 5 elements of the Wisdom of Ceremony, this meeting here is an opportunity for us to recognize that we're in that planning and preparation phase. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that that's kind of where we're at within this larger framework. Okay. So let me start off by introducing myself. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for all of those of you on the line that have utilized our chat box and have introduced yourself. We can all see who's on the line and where we're calling in from, and so we appreciate that. And tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Courtney Yarholer. I am the program coordinator for the OJJDP Tribal Youth TNTA Center, and I will be one of your facilitators for today's meeting. We also have Dr. Dolores Subia Bigfoot, who will be joining us later in the presentation, and you'll hear from her as she takes on the section that she's going to be presenting. But right now, we also have another guest with us, one of our program managers from OJJDP. I'd like to turn it over to Kara for a short introduction.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm so glad everyone could join us. My name is Kara McDonough, and I work with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Just wanted to welcome everyone. There's a lot of people on the line, I think, that have been part of the OJJDP Travel Youth Program community in the past. Maybe some of you are new grantees, but there are a lot of familiar names, so I'm really glad to see everyone here. If you are someone that's had a grant in the past, you will realize that we are making some changes this year to the way that we approach strategic planning. So in the past, we've sort of brought everyone who's gotten grants together into a strategic planning meeting somewhere around this time of the year, and then present a lot of material over a couple days, and then sort of have it due, several months later. And for the Purpose Area 8 grantees, and that's all of you all, we're trying something different this year. And basically, we're making better use of the technology that we have. And we're also trying to listen to some of your feedback and break up some of this training and some of the resources and the opportunities into smaller segments. So that's, I think, what you received prior to this meeting was a save the date for monthly calls of this type, and to also find ways of having you all have more interaction with each other. So this community of practice is a little bit different, and we want to hear your feedback throughout, and we're hoping that it really meets your needs, and that it's going to be a good support for your program. So I'm really glad that you're here, and welcome.
Thank you, Kara. Thank you so much. And that's right, we are on this journey together, and so we hope that message comes across clear today. These resources and the processes that we put together are there to support you, and so we have multiple levels of support, and so that's what we hope that we learn about today, which really takes us into our agenda. And for your convenience, we've emailed a more detailed agenda of today's meeting, as well as it's available for download in the Files for Download box in the lower right-hand corner. But very briefly, what we're going to learn today in the next hour and 15 minutes or so is we're going to learn about what is a community of practice. What is this mode of transportation, if you will, this model that we're going to use to work together as a group on similar things that we're working on. What is it? We're going to learn what the expectations are. We're going to learn how to fully benefit from this community of practice. And also, we're going to learn what topics that will be covered. So, also, we're going to talk about the Strategic Planning Toolkit. And the Strategic Planning Toolkit is really the focus of this community of practice. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit. And you have emailed, as well as available for download, a file for download, the curriculum and timeline, important due dates to be mindful of, as well as other resources. And so we want to make sure that you leave with all of the information that you need to get started. And we'll talk more about that as we progress through the presentation. And lastly, we'll talk about the Community Readiness Assessment. The Community Readiness Assessment is the first part of the Strategic Planning Toolkit. And we're going to talk about what it is and how to get started. So when you leave here, the idea is that you'll have everything that you need to get started on the Community Readiness Assessment. And again, if you have any questions, please use the questions box. If you have any comments, please use our chat box. What is a community of practice? Well, a community of practice, or COP, If you ever see that acronym, we're talking about the community of practice. It's a learning community focused on education, peer-to-peer learning and sharing, and replication of effective practices on specific topic areas. So that's the general overall description of a community of practice. And how we have structured this particular community of practice, it's really designed to support the strategic planning process. And so the strategic planning process, we're using the Strategic Planning Toolkit, which is a toolkit of tools and resources available for you. So in the Strategic Planning Toolkit will support OJJDP tribal grantees in implementing the various components of the required Strategic Planning Toolkit. It is a 9-month process. As Kara had mentioned, and in the Save the Date, there were multiple dates for these virtual meetings. And these virtual meetings are taking place once a month for the next 9 months. And going back to our element of commitment from the Wisdom of Ceremony framework, we know that it's a commitment. It's also a level of sacrifice, sometimes of our time. However, we know that following this process will be very beneficial for your program. So what is required for the grantee involvement? Now, when I say required for the grantee involvement, I'm talking about what are your expectations of being involved with this community of practice. Again, we highlighted a few of the elements that we think it hits on that Wisdom of Ceremony framework: commitment, sacrifice, and follow-through. The expectations for your involvement of this community of practice is, one, is to maintain a point of contact and updated contact information. We'd like you or somebody from your team that is highly involved in this planning to participate in all the virtual discussions. So today, the virtual meeting is, we also call it a virtual discussion. These discussions and meetings, virtual discussions, they're there as supplement to support your work for the next 9 months. Review exercises and the readings that are provided. So we will be providing readings and resources that help you in your planning along the way. So we're asked that you, to get the full benefit of this community of practice, that you utilize those readings, you utilize those resources. They're very well, a lot of thought has been put into those in terms of what's going to support you in your successful planning. Also, to complete the firm and the target dates, deadlines that are outlined in your packet as well. And we're going to talk more about that because some of those are related to your special conditions, and we'll talk more about that in a few slides. So, but you'll notice in that curriculum that the dates align. So, and also another thing I think that's going to help all of us, those that are facilitating as well as you all as grantees and as participants, providing feedback. Always let us know how we're doing, how we can improve. Maybe this chat feature could be different, or maybe other ways of connecting, or something that we haven't thought of. We're really looking to you to help us breathe the life into this community of practice. I believe we've set up a good skeleton, and we're really asking you to flesh it out and help us bring it to life. And so we, again, commitment, sacrifice, and follow through throughout the whole community of practice is appreciated. In terms of locating and contributing resources, how are we staying connected? I mean, here's some big questions I think that come to most of our minds when we're talking about we're participating in a community of practice. We're a community, we're gathering information, we're sharing information, which it's peer-to-peer. So in terms of resources, how do we locate them and how do we contribute to them? I think these 3 questions here really address those things. So how are we staying connected? How do we access resources? And how do we contribute to resources? So we have, on our side, began to develop some process, some platforms that are really being designed to support us connecting as peers. A platform, we have a blog platform that will be rolling out. It is not ready for today. However, it'll be ready shortly in the next couple of weeks. And so stay tuned for an email that'll go out on the listserv that we're finalizing again. And so the blog platform will also have a YouTube channel where we're going to archive all of the webinars and post other videos that are going to be supportive to this strategic planning process. And then also through that blog platform, that's how you're going to be able to contribute your own resources. So maybe you're working on a document, or you have a document that you've already created, say with your community, and that would be a great example to share with the rest of the group. That's a place where you're going to be able to have to upload, and you can upload your resource to this blog and contribute to that ongoing conversation and dialogue and continued learning of everybody involved here. Again, I know we're all calling in from different places across Indian country. So our use of these tools is really going to be critical in the success of all of our planning. So we look forward to everything that you contribute. And we look at it as when we come somewhere, when we go somewhere, what gifts are we receiving and what gifts are we leaving? So when we come together in this community of practice on these virtual places, virtual platforms like the blog site and the YouTube channel, we like to ask and think of it as what gifts are you receiving and what gifts are you leaving? And I think that's really going to tie our group together. So you may ask, well, what other assistance do we have? So we have the virtual meetings that are going to be monthly. Those are there to support your growth, your learning. We will have the blog platform, the YouTube channel platform. We'll also have your TNTA coordinator or your TA coordinator from the OJJDP Tribal Youth TNTA Center. Each of you have been assigned a TA coordinator. Your TA coordinator is really the central go-to person that will help you coordinate this whole, navigate your way through this community of practice, help navigate and coach you through the strategic planning process. They'll make sure you access all the correct tools, resources, readings, and information. So when in doubt, contact your TA coordinator. You also have access to your program managers, your OJJD program managers. And so the way we talk about it, our TA coordinators and our program managers are really going to work together, and so that we make sure that we capture all the needs that you may have. And so when in doubt, contact your TA coordinator, and if it's something that we can handle, we will more than happily be there with you. If it's something more appropriate for our program managers, we'll hand that off to them. So, and that was covered in our orientation presentation. So, for this particular community of practice, your TA coordinator, it all starts with your TA coordinator. So your TA coordinator will be contacting you shortly in the next couple of weeks. And they're going to work with you one-on-one through regular phone calls, emails, and any other forms of communication that you and your TA coordinator agree on. They'll also work to help pair up grantees that are doing similar work. So we know that talking with one another, maybe the mentoring, maybe the buddy kind of system, sometimes that can benefit us in the work that we're doing. So we're going to make sure that grantees that are doing similar work know about one another and that they're paired up. They're going to, again, ensure that you have access to all the relevant resources. They're going to provide feedback in a timely manner. So that's one commitment that we've made to you all, is to provide that feedback in a timely manner. Now, to begin, in this last bullet point also aligns with the timeline that we're going to be talking about shortly. Completing a TNTA needs assessment. So the TA coordinator will take the lead on that, but we need your help. Our TA coordinator can't do it alone. We're going to be calling each and every one of you. Your TA coordinator will be calling you and scheduling a time to begin your TA needs assessment. And that'll happen within the next couple of weeks. We have a deadline that we set for ourselves and that we hope we can get this process completed. Because once we've got the TA needs assessment, we can make better informed decisions in further resources that we develop, as well as it's going to help you in your planning. And so we really hope to complete that very, very quickly. And if your TA coordinator hasn't contacted you yet, they will be contacting you within the next couple of weeks. And so be looking for that. So let's jump into the Strategic Planning Toolkit. This toolkit supports grantees in completing a number of deliverables that will support organization and long-term success. Before we get into the toolkit, I want to pause for a moment, and I want to ask each and every one of you to give us some information, give us some input here. We'd like to know what your status is, because we realize that everybody that's coming into this, some of you may be in different places. Some of you may be a brand new Healing to Wellness grantee. Some of you may have an established Healing to Wellness program. Some may have an established program, and you may be working on sustainability efforts. So I'm going to ask each of you to select an answer where you are within your program. Great. Yeah, this is great. And so we see that we are all in different places in terms of readiness. And that's good to know. That's good to know, because our readiness runs across a continuum here, and so I think that really tells us a lot. Okay. Well, thank you, Mark, for that. So that readiness is really going to inform the shaping and development of your strategic planning. And so just a little bit to talk about the toolkit itself. The toolkit, you learn how to develop a mission and a vision. You learn how to formalize partnerships, learn how to develop logic models. And then we learn about the community readiness assessment. All of this is to develop plans for implementation, for communication, evaluation, and ultimately sustainability. So I challenge us to, in sustainability, we have standing out in green, because ultimately that's what we're hoping, to sustain our efforts within our communities. So I challenge us as we begin this strategic planning process to always have that sustainability in the back of our minds, because that should be a question, I think, that we always ask ourselves when we're planning an activity. So what is the impact, and how is this impact going to be sustained over time and beyond the grant funding? So that's my personal challenge as we begin the strategic planning journey. Again, if you have any questions, please type them in the questions box, or if you have anything that you want to share in the chat box, please do so. So the timeline for this 9-month planning process, because I know it can be kind of overwhelming when you hear that we're going to be together for 9 months, but we're actually together for a lot longer, for the life of your grant. And so that's this is a good 9 months where we're going to be planning together. It's supported through the community of practice as well as your TNTA coordinator. I want to stress that the majority of this work will be done within your location and with your community members. The work is not going to be, we don't expect the work to be done at these virtual meetings. These virtual meetings are merely supportive resources for the work that you're doing in your community. Because strategic planning doesn't really mean anything unless we have our community members involved. And when we talk about sustainability, when we plan with our community, those efforts are more than likely going to be sustained rather than if we plan without them. So again, the majority of this work will be done within your communities with your community members. Mark, could you pull up the special conditions pod? Thank you, Mark. It looks like, it looks like within the transition of using our webinar platform here, it looks like some of our lettering got cut off. But you've seen these special conditions before. They were presented to you in the orientation, and in the orientation webinar, as well as I emailed them before this meeting began, and they were also available as downloads in the downloads pod. And so those special conditions are the training and technical assistance needs assessment that I mentioned. Community readiness study is also a special condition. And then the individualized training and implementation plan or individualized action plan. So all of these together, when you meet those milestones, will be meeting your special conditions. Now, Mark, since let's pull up our other pod with the curriculum timeline. I think this has been emailed out to you as well. It's also available for download in this pod, in the downloads pod. So we ask that you look at the one in your hand, and this curriculum outlines all of the next 9 months, the different topics that we're going to be addressing, all the topics within that make up the strategic planning toolkit. It also outlines due dates, or those deadlines that we had mentioned. Those deadlines are in the strategic planning, the special conditions slide that we just had up. Unfortunately, they were cut off on our screen, but you have them in front of you. And so those due dates, if you notice, the due dates in this curriculum timeline align with the due dates on the special conditions slide. So keep those in mind, because those are the milestones that we're shooting for. And you're going to be working with your TA coordinator to make sure that we reach those milestones, we reach these dates. This particular document that you're looking at is a growing document. And what I mean by that is we're going to be adding to this document throughout the life of this community of practice. So when we get to, you can see that January, February, March, we have exercises and we have resources available for you. So those are to get you started in this community readiness assessment section. Starting in April, you can see Vision and Mission, Session 4. We have yet to include exercises and resources or additional readings, but those are coming. Those will be added. And again, your TA coordinator will make sure that you get the latest revised copy of this whenever we update it. When we update it with new information, with new resources. The main thing, one of our main focus is to make sure that you receive all of the information that is available to you. Okay. Mark, let's go back to the slides. So again, use that as a reference point, the curriculum timeline, and we will have, it'll be posted on the blog site and be updated there regularly, and again, you'll get consistent communication with your TA coordinator when new resources are added. So let's just pause here. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Please feel free to type your questions into the chat box. I know that we've covered a lot. I haven't seen any questions roll through yet. Where is the blog site and what is the download pod? Okay, thank you, April. The blog site is the site that's going to be used to support all of us connecting virtually. And that blog site is we're still developing it. We're in the final stages of developing, so be looking for it in a couple of weeks to roll it out. And we're going to communicate with you by email, and then your TA coordinator will make sure that you get the information. But we'll let you know when we roll out the blog site. We also want to plan an orientation webinar for the blog site so that we can all get on and jump on and learn how to use it and practice using it, practice uploading things, downloading things, commenting on one another's work, complimenting one another's work. And so be looking for that. And like our other webinars, if you're not able to join that particular orientation, it will be archived, and your TA coordinator will make sure that you get that information and also that you learn how or know how to utilize that blog site. So. What is the download pod? So to the right of the questions box, I believe this is what you're talking about, April. To the right of the questions box, there is it says files for download. Those are files that you can click on that and you can download these files. I've sent all these files to you in the email prior to today's meeting, so you should have them in your email. We just wanted to give another option to access that information. So. Also, when we do get the blog site up, this information will be posted there as well. So we want to make sure that we have all the bases covered and that you have access to all of the information. So I'm not able to see the full, oh, there it is. I clicked on it. So Norma asked, we are an established program. Do we need to develop a new vision and mission, or can we continue to use the current one? So I think that's a great question. Thank you, Norma. I think many of you may be in that similar situation where you already have a vision and mission, or you have different elements from these, from what you might see in our toolkit. And but I think it's also an opportunity for us to learn more and to revisit and see if it still fits with what we're doing. I do also know that our project manager, Kara, may have a little bit more to add to this question, to this answer, so I'm going to turn it over to Kara.
Sure. Hi, Norma. It's great. This is a great question, and I want to also just talk a little bit about the special conditions that Courtney touched on. So if you're an existing program that already has a mission and vision and has a lot of these elements that you're working from, we certainly do not need you to go back and do it again in any way. What we would ask is that you attend those virtual meetings, because we're trying to keep a community of practice going, and use that time either to share the things that are working with your colleagues, or also hopefully that you're looking at it as an evolving kind of thing, and that maybe you can revisit it and make sure that there's not something you want to add to it, or some way that you want to improve on what you're already doing. So I say all that. Some of you, and I know that there are definitely some folks on the line who have done our Strat Pack process before, and maybe you even did the strat pack process to come up with your current vision and mission and some of the community partnerships and stuff like that. Our special conditions are different now. We're not, you do not need to do all the elements in a formal strategic plan and turn it into OJJDP in order to have that special condition removed. In the past, that's what we've done, is had people really go through every single sort of element in a certain amount of time and turn it in as, a finished product. And now we're doing something a little different, which is to say all these elements are works in progress. There could be some that you definitely have completely down, and you can help us, present that information to other people, and there could be some that you're still working on. So we're treating them more as, as components that we want to keep revisiting and that we want to learn about and put together in our own way, but not as something that you'll turn in as a finished product to OJJDP. So that means that the finished product that you do turn into OJJDP are those three elements that were on the slide that we looked at earlier, which is, and all of them you're really doing with the TA Center. So they have to do with your TA plan. So that's the things that you want us to help you find resources on, and also the community readiness assessment. So that does constitute a change, and if there's any other questions that come up about that, please do feel free to type them in.
So I just want to also expand on that explanation just a bit. And yes, we do. We welcome you. We want you. We encourage you to join the virtual meetings and to join those conversations on the blog site. Maybe you already have a vision and mission. Maybe what might be beneficial for other grantees is to hear from your experience, like lessons learned while developing that vision and mission, or lessons learned since you've developed it, or moving forward. So again, I think there's, even if we do have tools that have already been developed, coming together as a group is still very beneficial for again, what gifts are you bringing and what gifts are you receiving? So think of it in the spirit of that essence. So your full participation will be greatly appreciated, not only by us, but I'm sure by your peers. Okay. I think we have answered all of the questions. Great questions. We're going to move right on to the next portion of today's presentation, where we really talk about learn more about the community readiness assessment. Because if you look at the strategic planning toolkit, which actually, let me make a quick note, you will be receiving the strategic planning toolkit with from your TA coordinator as you begin those conversations around the needs assessment. Kara had mentioned the strat pack. So what we've really done with our strategic planning toolkit, we've expanded those tools to include the community readiness assessment. And so I'm going to turn it over at this time to our next presenter, Dr. Dolores Subia-Bigfoot. She's going to tell us more about the community readiness model and how it can prepare us to begin our strategic planning process. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. This is Dolores Subia-Bigfoot, but typically people know me by D. Bigfoot, and I see by the listing of the people that are on the call that I know some of you, so it's nice to see names. Hello to you guys. I am going to present information about the community readiness model, which is very exciting because it was actually developed out of the need to look at our tribal communities. It comes from a work that's been done in tribal communities It's an understanding from our indigenous people that have a need to better understand what is going on in their communities. So it's a model that is from our communities that work in our communities. So it's really nice. You know, we don't always get an opportunity to say that a model has come out of our tribal communities, and this model did. As we looked at the community readiness model, we want to make sure that we acknowledge, somebody's getting excited with the slides here, we want to acknowledge that it was developed by tribal people, professionals, including Pam Jumper Thurman, Dr. Thurman, and Dr. Barbara Blest, and their colleagues at the Triethnic Center for Prevention Research at Colorado State University. And they also have the Community Readiness Center there that came out of this work. Next slide. As we look at the community readiness model, do I have a control of it? Oh, no. Mark, do you want to switch slides now? Thank you. As we look at the community readiness model, it really is about what is the community's level of readiness to anticipate change, to think about change, to make change on a particular issue. And we all know that change is something that is difficult to do. I always give the example of when people come into a presentation that I'm doing and they sit down and they're there for, a couple of hours, and then I ask them, I said, okay, everybody, can you get up and just move from your spot, go down 2 or go up 2 rows and go over 3 seats? And people just sit there. And then I say, okay, how many of you are willing to do this? And so about a third of them are willing to do it. A third of them are, sort of tentative about doing it, and a third of them don't want to move at all. So making a change is really an effort. It's not impossible, but we recognize that there's a process to make it more helpful so that change can occur. As we think about the community readiness model, this model creates an opportunity for the community to change based upon the belief systems within that culture, based upon the existing resources. And as we think about it, it's what is the issue that we need to identify so that we can have a change. And in this, the model, we consider attitudes, we consider knowledge, we consider resources, effort, activities, and then it's looking at the views of the community members, so, how they're scattered throughout the community. It's looking at the leadership within our tribal communities and what that means as we think about who can be those champions of change. So as we look at the next slide and think about the theory behind the model, and so what theory is about is a basic understanding of this is how things work. This is what we need to have in place in order to make things function in the way that we want to. How can we anticipate what we can have an impact on? So theory is really about an idea or orientation about how can we anticipate something. So as we think about the theory behind the model of community readiness, we're looking at the individual stages of change model. And stages of change is a stepwise kind of thing that we need to consider. So you can see there's pre-contemplation, so this is not yet acknowledging that we have an issue, contemplating, so this is acknowledging the problem, but where a lot of times we're not certain what to do next, and so there's that, uncertainty. There's a desire, but uncertainty. Preparation is ready to do something. Okay, we have an action plan. And so this moves into action. This is being engaged, being actively involved, it's taking those steps, and then maintenance. How do we continue to maintain this change and continue to commit to change? We have to also be aware that there's a relapse. What does this mean? We fall back into that old behavior. We tend to abandon the new changes that we acquired. And I think this is really easy to understand as we think about New Year's resolutions. Yes, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat less white bread. And then, right off the bat, we're making bologna sandwiches. So, relapse is something that we have to build into it, and it's something that we can address. So as we think about the theory behind it, we're also looking at the whole community. And as we go to the next slide, what issues does it address? It really looks at a variety of social issues. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but the community readiness model, you can look at a lot of the publications. It talks about being implemented with drug use, being implemented with violence, different kinds of trauma. So as we think about our juvenile justice system, this is what we're looking at, is a way of changing so that we can figure out how best to serve our youth. And as we go to the next slide, we see that the community readiness model is really very user-friendly. You need to have some training. We're going to offer some resources for you, webinars and other things to help you to get the basic information. So how do you conduct interviews? It takes 8 to 10 structured key interviews. You look at scoring those interviews. There's a process for scoring them, giving different weights. It's really local. So local community members asking questions about local issues of local members. You need to be trained in the community readiness model, and we will assist you as the Tribal Youth TNTA Center to make sure we don't want to ask you to do something if we don't also provide the resources so that you can accomplish that. And we can offer you a step-by-step manual, and also we will be pulling in Barb and Pam to assist as we think about rolling out the community readiness model. As we go to the next interview, what is helpful, what is useful? It depends on that local input. It is bringing in the information from your local tribal communities to help say, what are the resources, what are the concerns? And so it's really culturally appropriate understandings that lead to culturally appropriate strategies. And so this is how it is weighed within the community involvement, community-supported, community understanding. We don't require outside experts. It's all community-based. And so as we think about what is going on when we have this understanding of and inquiry into community members, it really initiates that community action. And when we ask people what they think the problems are, what they think the solutions are, then it inspires that community ownership. And as this information is gathered, then again, it feeds back into community-owned, community-motivated. As we look at the next model in terms of why we find communities in terms of using this model, community members are more aware of what kind of both formal and informal resources that exist, both the structured and unstructured resources, and the strengths. It identifies strategies that match the current stage of readiness, whether it's contemplating or the action, that it helps people to say, well, this program has already got a needs assessment, or this program has already developed a resource guide, or this program has already done this. So it really helps you to match the strategies with the readiness. And then more importantly, we have this collective vision that helps to move and helps to sustain change. And again, this is where we want to go, is to shift what might not have been working before towards a model or toward a framework that makes it work easier. So as we look at the next slide in terms of the dimensions of community readiness, and this is the fun part. This is where we get to know the communities better, and then community members get to know their own community better as we think about not everybody knows everything, but by having these key stakeholders interviewed, and they don't have to be leadership, they can be the janitor at the school because he has so much information, or it could be the ambulance driver, or it could be the intake person at the juvenile detention center. So as we think about that, we're looking at community efforts. What's going on in terms of programs, in terms of activities, in terms of policies? As we look at my computer screen disappeared for a minute. As we look at the community knowledge of the efforts and what that means for them and how they see who has commitment and who is willing to stretch. I always say that our tribal communities are full of volunteers. People are always volunteers, whether it's for a golf tournament or basketball or horseshoes or dinners or rodeos. We have a lot of effort that's being extended, and so getting that information and what it means in terms of how people can see those efforts. The leadership, both formally and informally, and we know that there's different people that may never ever have an elected position, but they have a lot of weight in guiding leadership. The community climate, knowledge about the issues, and also resources. So we're looking at people, time, money, space, etc. So as we think about community readiness, we're saying, how does all this work together? So as we go to the next slide and we talk about stages of community readiness, where we have no awareness, and I'm sure many of you have heard things like, well, they don't even know what's going on, or maybe they even say, well, that's denial. They're just resisting. So there's these different stages of community readiness, from vague awareness, pre-planning, preparation, and as we go up this line all the way toward professionalization, meaning we have established programs, meaning we have people who are trained, meaning there is a infrastructure. So all of these things are in place so that we can address whatever the issues are. So as we look at the next slide, what the model can do. And if you, I hope you can sense my enthusiasm, because we can identify what our resources are within our tribal communities. And so it's not only what our resources within our tribal communities, but also what might be coming into our tribal communities that are helpful, whether it's volunteers, whether it is people who make donations, whether it's funded grants. So there's all kinds of ways of thinking about identifying resources. And also identifying obstacles. So what are those barriers? In terms of the readiness level, what are the, I just lost my, I'm sorry, I just lost my screen. I only have so many minutes on my screen. If I don't click on it, it fades away. So let's identify those obstacles. What are they? What are the barriers? And some of it is in terms of the limited infrastructure. Some of it's in terms of, limited human resources. Some of it's in terms of limited training. Some of it in terms of attitudes. So there's things that we can identify. And we can help to provide an assessment of how ready the community is to address an issue. So this will give you an idea of, the way we view it is that you really can't make a plan of action until you know where the community is at. So it supports the development of strategies that match the stage of readiness for your particular community. And so you're able to say, okay, this is where we're at, this is what our obstacles are at this particular point, and this is how we can address them. So as we go to the next slide, we can say, we can identify the issue. I was talking very fast so that I wouldn't go over my time, but I think we're okay with our time now. I'll slow down. So as we look at the process for using the community readiness model, and fortunately for us, we have a lot of resources, and so these resources are also at your disposal. We can identify the issue, and as you know that in many of our tribal communities, there are overlapping issues, there are complex issues, there are compounding issues. So being able to identify how these particular issues may intertwine with each other. So poverty and poor school performance. So, how do these things come into play? And also defining the community. So are we only going to be working with young teenagers who are pregnant? Are we only going to be working with, adolescents who have illegal sexual behavior? Are we only going to be working with youth that are in a, boys and girls club? Are we only going to be working with the staff at the juvenile detention center? Are we only going to be addressing our concerns to the judicial staff? Are we only going to be working with law enforcement? So, how are we going to define our community? Is it going to be limited that, or is it going to be bigger than that in terms of all of those other related community members that have an impact or have input into, the judicial system or the courts or the detention center or, whatever we might be working with? Conduct key respondents interviews. So this means, being trained in interviewing skills, being able to feel comfortable contacting people, to set up appointments, recognize how to set up appointments. Not everybody has, phones. Not everybody feels comfortable in having an interview in their home. Not everybody wants to be interviewed individually. So how do we help facilitate this interview process? We don't want to ask leading questions. We don't want to have a way of biasing individuals' responses. And we also want to come with the mindset of what gifts are we giving and what gifts are we taking. And so being respectful of the words that people are giving us, and that we're helping them understand what we're trying to accomplish as we think about the community and how ready that community is for change. We want to be able to systematically and thoughtfully score the readiness level. So we want to be have all of the grantees well trained in being able to understand how to score. And we don't want to skew any information. We want to be thoughtful about, as we help grantees develop this strategic plan, that all the information is accurate and that it's not distorted by having scoring or raw scores that are not reflected correctly. And then by having this scoring to determine readiness, then we go into developing the strategic planning, conducting workshops. And so this, in terms of the process for the community readiness model, we're looking toward utilizing this in terms of measuring the community readiness and moving them toward change. So we're not really we're going to be developing strategies for probably we're going to be looking at the community of practice, so in terms of a broader workshop model. And so as we go to the next slide, what we want to encourage, what we want to reinforce, what we want to make sure that is understand is that we have strategies of intervention and that we want to make sure that they're appropriate for your local community in terms of where your community is at for readiness to change. And we don't want to force, or we don't want to prod or push someone into, or a community into a change mindset without having all the preliminary kinds of understandings in place, so that we can make sure that we support the grantee, support you at where your particular community is at. Maybe, we heard earlier where somebody said, well, we've already done the strategic planning. We're already moving forward with that. Great. So, let's implement what we can at that stage. Whereas we have a lot of other Healing to Wellness grantees that are saying, we're just started. So let's figure out where they are at. So there's going to be different stages of community readiness within the grantees that we have on this phone call right now, which is really good because we're going to all be able to determine where that might be and work from that point. We're not going to determine the point. The community will determine the point. And that's the exciting part. So as we go to the next slide, our next step, and I'm going to, actually, Courtney, do you want me to turn it over to you?
Sure.
Great.
That'll be great. That will be great. And so before we talk about the next step, because we're going to get there, I wanted to go back to this slide. I like to move. We are going to get a little bit involvement here, and so we prepared a couple of polls. And so, Mark, I'm going to ask that you pull our polling over and ask all of you to participate in our polls. And okay, so they're going up. And our polls are: have you ever heard of it before today? Have you ever heard of the Community Readiness Program or Community Readiness? And if you have you ever used community readiness in your community? And so, oh wow, that's great information. Look at that. Looks like we still have a few coming in. Wow. I just want to note that I feel like our participation in the community of practice is starting off great. So thank each and every one of you for your participation. Great. So now we can, thank you for adjusting the size so we can see them a little bit better. So it looks like, in terms of have you ever heard of the community readiness, we have 58% that have indicated that they have, and 41% that have indicated that they have not. In terms of using community readiness, We're pretty close split down the middle. So 45% have used some form of community readiness, and then others, 54%, have not. And so I think that gives us a really great insight. One, we're excited that we have people in our community of practice here that have experience in doing community readiness. Maybe they can bring that experience. We invite you to bring that experience when we have our discussions, when we have our online blog going, when we pair you up maybe with somebody that is new to the process. So again, we're going to be looking at your guidance. For those that are new, we're going to be looking for your questions, your inquiries, because with your questions and your inquiries, you really challenge us to think broadly. And so again, all of our involvement is critical, and is really going to, again, breathe the life into this group that we're calling the community of practice. So it's great to see that we have so much experience on the line and out there in Indian country. I know a lot of times Indian country we have we hear a lot of negativity coming out of Indian country, or ideas about people's ideas about Indian country might be kind of negative, but we just saw right there that we're examples that there's some really good things already happening, and so we want to continue that and pull that out, so promote that. Thank you for participating in our polls. We're going to move into the next steps. So what is next? What do we do in terms of community readiness and getting started on our community readiness assessment? So the first step would be to review the resources included in session 1 of the community of practice. So in that grid that we showed earlier that you have in front of you, if you haven't had it, if you don't have it in front of you, if you don't see it, your TA coordinator will make sure that you get that. It was also emailed to each and every one of you, so you can find it there. And it's the Community of Practice Curriculum Timeline is the title of that document. In that document, you look towards the bottom, and you can see where it'll say resources. Well, there's some links there to some videos that go more in depth on community of practice. And so we encourage you to start there, look at those videos, tell us what you think about them, and I think as you're watching them, you might recognize some cues, you might have ideas that go off into your head. And so that's wonderful. That's what we want these videos to do, is to start cueing those ideas for you. Also, your TA coordinator, as we reach out to you for the needs assessment, will also begin looking at guiding you through this community readiness assessment portion, and provide you with any additional resources that we have planned. Another step is to begin educating and planning with your local team. So that includes youth, family members, partners in the community. You can do that by sharing some of the resources that we post, so like the videos that I had mentioned. Those are really great to orient yourself to community readiness. And they're already developed, so we're not having to recreate the wheel or create big presentations. Say, here, check this out, watch this, and then watch it with them, and it'll prompt some discussions within your local team, your local community. Again, your TA coordinator will help with the planning and linking to additional training, posting and commenting on the blog platform. We're working diligently to get that out and running, because we're very excited. We didn't want to rush it. We wanted something that's going to be very valuable and serve our needs. We also encourage you to put it on your calendars, if you haven't already, to meet virtually at our next community of practice, which is scheduled for February 23rd, to learn and share experiences. The next community of practice, and the ones from here on out, we hope to be a little bit more interactive. And so we got, you heard a lot from us, from D&I. So next time, we're going to work on how we can contribute to the conversations a little bit more. I'm seeing a question here in the questions box. April mentioned that I'm cutting in and out. Sorry about that for everybody out there if you missed anything that I said. Again, this webinar is recorded and it will be posted and available to you. So let's go to some questions. Please use the questions box and enter your questions in. And if you have any questions on community readiness, Dee and I are here and willing and ready to take your questions and do the best that we can. So we noticed that there are grantees who are currently using the community readiness model. If you're interested in peer sharing, please enter yes in the chat pod. That's a great idea. Awesome. Great. We're getting some answers in, we're getting some offers in, if you will. So Ronald Bowen says yes, but for suicide. And so I think that's great. Again, learning from the experience. You know, topic by topic, I think we don't want the topic to limit our experience. And so myself, I have a suicide prevention background, and so I've seen the community readiness model done for suicide prevention, but I also see the benefit of it benefiting all other topics. And so similar to, I think if you're working with people, this is really going to help. I think that's really the topic is people. So again, I'm going to put it out there again. Are there any others that have used the community readiness model that would like to share? Oh, great. Ada Melton says we use a different process with our comprehensive justice plan. So again, I'm sure that there are lessons learned there that can benefit this community and this group and all of our learning. So. Has anybody planned on using a community readiness model for this particular program, for your OJJDP grant? Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Jasmine. Jasmine asked, those who have used the community readiness program in their community, was it successful? Tell us a little bit about it. So again, I want to thank you all on the line. Continue to learn that maybe as a community, we all contribute. So even asking the questions. Thank you, Jasmine. We have several participants as well that sitting quietly, and so if you have anything to come to mind or want to include, please do so. Okay, Ada has said that they've used the community readiness model with another tribe, but we need their permission to share. We understand that, of course. So, but again, I'm wondering if there's lessons learned that could benefit the group here. Those are the kind of things that we're also looking for. I think as we move forward in this community of readiness section, and even just the strategic planning toolkit community of practice, although it's a group for us in our planning, a closed group for us. I think we can still invite guests to come in. So if any of you know of anybody that might have some good things to share on a specific topic that we're covering, let us know, and we'll invite them in. And I think that would be great. So Ronald Bowen says, for Menominee, the suicide community readiness assessment was a big help. Like on the take-home message slide, it helped use in our planning appropriate events and activities for that project. Great, great. Well, I forgot to advance. We're on the questions slide. But we got some great discussion going on here. So I know the oh, that's great when I see multiple attendees typing. Awesome. I know typing is a little bit different for some of us that would rather talk, and so thank you for your patience and your patience. Oh, great. Looks like we already made a connection here and plans for there's some really great discussion going on here in the chat box. I feel like I should have some action music playing in the background or something.
Courtney, this is Kara.
Uh-huh.
And I actually wrote something in the chat box as well and then realized I could actually talk. But I did have a conversation with a tribe that used the community readiness assessment around the issue of drug and alcohol prevention work that they had been doing. And they already had a lot of activities that they were doing. And then they were exposed to the assessment, the model, and they said that they really got a lot of insights from using it, and it helped them to kind of look at things in a slightly different way and to understand some obstacles that they had been having.
Right.
And they used those insights to kind of rework some of what they were doing in their program.
Right. Great. Thanks. Thank you, Kara. I think that's what we find when we go through the community readiness model. We have our ideas. We think we have really good ideas, community involvement. But when we get that community involvement, it just really expands our ideas, our options, things that we hadn't even thought of before. Ada's talking, as she mentioned, a few barriers with the community readiness assessment. Like many things, there's always going to be some challenges. Again, I hope that we can address those challenges and share some lessons learned here within this community of practice. I'd like to hear how they have overcame some of those barriers with staff time, or hear about some of those scoring challenges and how you overcame those. So we may not have time to share them fully here, but if you're willing to share lessons learned in future meetings, we encourage you to do so. Ada, would you be willing to share lessons learned in future meetings? I'll do that. Okay. So,
oh, Courtney, this is Dee.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to say that in a recent tribal community, that there were elders that were in their late 60s and 70s, that were some of the conducting some of the interviews, and so the scoring. I think it's always helpful to have somebody as you walk through that scoring and kind of talk about what it is that they have, how to interpret some of that, and so it's sort of like defining words for them, for their community. And so when somebody says a particular phrase, then the community gets to determine what that phrase means. And so even, individuals, elders can, even 60 and 70, years old, they have become very invested in this community of change and, community readiness and in the understanding of change. And they were thinking, well, we're too old to change. And then by being the interviewers in this process, they realized that just the interviews were helping make the change, because their mindset was shifting just in that process of interviewing. And then in the process of scoring and in the process of sort of defining what were the terminologies or the words that people were using, how they wanted to determine that in terms of meaningfulness. So I think, the process helps in that change also.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I couldn't agree more. So there was a question from, I believe, from Diane Whitson. Let's see, will there be an email list so all of us can interact with each other? And the answer is yes. We're actually putting together the listserv for the Healing to Wellness grantees, so all of you will be on that listserv. And that is another place where we can stay connected. Because we encourage those where you guys can reach out to one another. And we will share the list of attendees today so that you can, if there's anybody that you want to follow up with, that's great.